Hey, Sean.
Hey, Chip.
So we're live right now.
Oh, hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking this afternoon about Section 215, which is up for renewal. My name is Chip Gibbons. I am the Policy Director of Defending Rights and Dissent, where I authored the report, Still Spying on Dissent, the Enduring Problem of FBI First Amendment Abuse. I've also written about FBI abuse of power for The Washington Post, The Nation, and The Intercept. Today, I'm joined by Sean Vitka. Sean is the Senior Policy Counsel for Demand Progress. In addition to serving as Policy Counsel for Demand Progress and Demand Progress Education Fund, he also serves as the Director of the Fourth Amendment Advisory Committee. His analysis and commentary on privacy and technology have been published by Ars Technica, the Chicago Tribune, the Christian Science Monitor, the Washington Post, and elsewhere. The legislative fights he has been a part of include defending federal funding for Planned Parenthood, supporting net neutrality, passing the reforms to the FOIA, and today, obviously, 215. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean.
Thank you for having me. And credit to Chip and D-Rad. They all do amazing work, and thanks to everybody who's listening to this.
Sure. So why don't we start with the most basic question. What is 215, and why is it so concerning?
Great. How long do we have?
15 to 30 minutes.
Okay, great. So
the last time I asked someone this question, they started with the history of the 9/11 report. I'm like, no, we don't have that much time. So a little more brevity than that.
Fair enough. So Section 215 is part of the PATRIOT Act. It was passed in 2001. The moment that Chip is actually describing, it is a fascinating period of time. But Section 215 back then was controversial because it allowed for the warrantless access of library records. And that itself was enough to cause a fierce amount of criticism back in 2001 against the PATRIOT Act. We never saw that provision get fixed. In fact, we didn't see much about Section 215 for a long time. It came back into the news most significantly when Snowden revealed that it had been secretly misinterpreted. And what Section 215 is supposed to do, what Congress passed in 2001, is allow the government to subpoena any tangible thing. Generally speaking, what you're talking about there are phone records, email records, not the content, but the information, the metadata around it. So who called who emailed, when, potentially where were they, but also purchase records. So things like, who's buying what would be subject to 215. And then the statute actually specifically allows, for instance, for medical information to be collected as well. So it is designed to be for as many things as possible, which was already a way too broad statute in the first place. But what we found out in 2013 was that the government had misinterpreted it, had really abused this law, and convinced the secret foreign intelligence surveillance court that it allowed for the bulk metadata collection of all records. And this was a shocking, wildly illegal interpretation of law that had already been operational for 7 years by the time the United States people found out about it. And it was actually the very first thing Snowden revealed. Now, since then, on the other side, the bulk program was shut down, but then Congress also established something called the Call Detail Records Program.
And this is in the USA Freedom Act, right?
Yes. So the USA Freedom Act reauthorizes an amended version of 215, not nearly amended enough. And on top of that, it also establishes this Call Detail Records Program, which D-Rad and a variety of others were very critical of back at the time. Ultimately, come 2018, the government has to shut down that program because it is collecting an unbelievable amount of information, but it's also collecting a lot of it unlawfully. We actually don't know how much of it was collected unlawfully, but in 2018 alone, the government collected 434 million phone records in the pursuit of 11 targets. That is the Call Detail Records.
Compared to the number of targets?
It's a pretty wild. It's totally disproportionate. In fact, those records affected over 19 million different phone identifiers. So what we saw there was, once again, a failed attempt to use Section 215 to conduct mass surveillance. That combined with this underlying issue that goes all the way back to 2001 around what the government can actually do with this authority, and the concerns are still very much profound relative to this reauthorization.
Sure. So last week, the Senate voted to reauthorize 215. There were a number of amendments that were made or proposed, including some controversial ones around warrantless collection of internet search history. Could you explain to us what some of those amendments were and how they fared?
Yeah, so there was this unbelievable fight that, frankly, the civil liberties community, I would say, outperformed in. This moment in the Senate was the last chance for members of Congress to actually vote on the substance of this bill. And this will be relevant later, but in the House, no committee of jurisdiction marked this up. And what that means is that there was never a chance to debate what this reauthorization did. It was instead a leadership engineered product that was deeply flawed and that got rammed through the House. On the plus side, that gave the Senate a really good reason to say, no, we're not going to do it quite like that. Now, Mitch McConnell tried to very aggressively, but our allies, namely Senators Lee, Leahy, Paul, Wyden, Udall, and Gaines, they managed to stop that by getting at least 40 senators to privately, more or less, tell Majority Leader McConnell that they would not support forcing this bill through. So we got these votes on the other side of that, of this very critical moment. And what we saw last week was astounding. And I really love the opportunity to be able to talk to people who aren't in DC about this, because I fear that there is reason, and maybe good reason, to be pessimistic about the chances for Congress to do something meaningful in this space. That's not the moment we're in anymore. Last week, going into last week, like the media reports, for instance, on these amendments, assumed that there would be, it would be impossible for any of them to be adopted. We ended up getting on the Lee-Leahy amendment, which strengthens the independent amici, is what they're called, but they're just independent lawyers that also operate within the FISA court ecosystem. The amendment says if Bill Barr targets a religious group, these independent lawyers have to be able to review that application and raise issues with it, which is so critical because we know the FISA court has been abused, we know the FISA process isn't working, and we know there's nobody else but the government making these arguments in the court. So that was a powerful reform that does matter, and we won that 77-19. And that is so profound for the landscape of reform. It's hard to overstate. Chip, I just want to make sure I'm still going because you're frozen for me. Can you hear me still?
I can hear you, yes.
But
you have disappeared on my computer. I don't know if that's me or you.
I suspect I'm coming back. If you can still hear me, I'll continue.
I can still hear you, but I cannot see you.
Let's see.
Your video is on.
Oh,
there you go. You're back.
There we are. Sorry about that.
Okay.
This 77-19 in the Senate is an unbelievable performance, and it also tells us that Mitch McConnell can't single-handedly stop reform. So that's a really big deal, because the reason why the House theoretically rammed this through is because Mitch McConnell would stop anything better, and we just proved that wrong. So that's the Lee-Leahy in an amendment in a nutshell. There's also the Paul amendment, which failed. That is not going to come back up for a vote, so I'm just going to kind of skip past that for now, not to give it short shrift. But the last amendment was the Wyden-Daines amendment. And the Wyden-Daines amendment is very simple. It says that you cannot use Section 215 of the PATRIOT Act to warrantlessly collect people's internet browsing and search history. Now, if you combine that very reasonable policy with the very real concerns around how the government uses this authority and has abused this authority in the past, that is a very important reform to everybody in America. That amendment got 59 votes. That's not enough to have won. And that's a problem, but we also had 2 senators who were unable to be there in person, and we know that they supported. So we can prove pretty definitively that we have 61 votes in the Senate. That's not just a majority, that's a filibuster-proof majority. But we don't just get to choose what goes to the floor. We have to very precisely take advantage of any opportunities like that. So what the community has all shifted towards on the other side of that vote is saying, hey, Speaker Pelosi, you actually have to consider this again because it was amended. And now we know Mitch McConnell cannot stop this amendment. So the decision is squarely in Democratic leadership's hands in the House, whether or not this gets a vote. If it gets a vote, it will pass. They could just add it, frankly, and I doubt anybody would blink an eye. And then we know it passed the Senate. So where we sit at this very, very critical moment is, what is Speaker Pelosi going to do?
So what should people at home who are concerned about this be doing? Defending Rights and Dissent has an action alert that we're going to be sending out later today, and we're putting on our Facebook page, and I can talk about that. But what are you recommending people do?
Yeah, so one, for the record, I've worked with Chip and Sue for a long time now. I know that they get the policy and they get the strategy and they get they understand how to make a difference on the Hill. Speaking as somebody who has spent nothing but the last 2 weeks with my head buried as much in Hill stuff as possible, I want to come out and endorse what they are asking you to do, if they've asked you to do anything.
I'm going to announce what we're going to ask to do in a minute. I haven't told them yet, Sean. You might be horrified. Who knows?
Oh no,
never endorse before you hear the action.
I didn't. I trust Chip and I trust Sue. I really do. And
you as executive director, Defending Rights and Dissent, for people watching at home who are not on a first name basis with the DRAC.
Yes. But they really.
I hope you watch.
You're both great and you do great work. So I do trust them. But with that said, specifically what we need right now on the Hill is a little bit extra political savvy than we usually do. And what I mean by that is very specific. If Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Nadler in particular can avoid this issue for long enough to make it a fait accompli that this bill does not get amended, that it's going to the floor for up or down vote, that there's no chance to offer this amendment or have it added, they can lock that in the very near future, in the next few days. We may not know about it then, and we won't really know what's going to happen until May 27th, which is when they're expecting to vote on it or start voting on it. What we need very much is for representatives to make clear to both of them that they support this amendment. And usually, the reason why this is a little bit more sophisticated than usual, usually you're saying, I want this one thing added, vote yes. Or why didn't you vote for this thing? Tell me why. This isn't quite that binary. We need leaders. This is a real moment. There is nothing stopping this from happening but the will of the Democratic Party in the House. Not only that, but Republicans will actually back this as well. So it's really down to the Democratic leadership. The more representatives, instead of waiting, we can't let them wait for the vote. We need people to say, I want this vote. My constituents want me to take this vote. I want to bring back a more private internet for my constituents. That is what we are fighting for. That is the opportunity before every representative, and any person who's not trying to get that done is not on our side.
So what Defending Rights and Dissent is mobilizing its supporters to do, and we're going to send out an email later today. It's going to be on our Facebook page because the URL is not very user-friendly. We're asking you right now to contact your member of Congress and ask them to tell Pelosi that they want a chance to vote on the Wyden-Daines amendment.
Yeah, that is a powerful message. And also, just getting these offices to look at what happened in the Senate will change minds. Every one of these offices has been told for years that the reason they cannot protect their constituents' privacy is because McConnell will stop it.
If you're watching, go on. So if you're watching on Facebook Live right now, we're going to put the link up. If you're watching this not on Facebook Live and a recording of this, You can find the action on rightsanddissent.org, or if you're already on our Facebook page, it should be there. And if you are on our mailing list, you will be getting this action list. And if you're not on our mailing list, you should really join it. And you can sign up on our website at rightsanddissent.org. Do you have anything else you want to share on this topic, Sean?
I would just say this is one of those moments where it really could make the difference. This is a good policy that is yes or no, and we need to be sure that nobody thinks we understand it as anything else, because it'll be the best defense to not doing this is going to be, we didn't have the time, we didn't, there were other priorities, the Senate already passed it. It's all crap. It's not, it's just not a good reason not to do this. We know it passed the Senate. Usually we can't say that. In fact, I'm not sure we've ever been able to say that before.
That's a very powerful message, Sean. Thank you for joining us. That was Sean Vitka, the Senior Policy Counsel for Demand Progress. And I am Chip Gibbons with Defending Rights and Dissent. I mentioned earlier we have a report on FBI surveillance, which you should check out. The timeline behind me is from it. It is a timeline of FBI abuse. It's a virtual background threat. I'm not actually trapped in a giant timeline of FBI abuse, but in a certain way, we all really are. Which is why it's very exciting. Which is why it's very exciting that we have this opportunity to do something positive. So please take the action, and thank you, Sean, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Chip.